Hey everyone, welcome to another video. If you love film or television content, please consider clicking that subscribe button because today I'm going to be talking about the new Pablo Larrain film that just dropped on Netflix, El Conde. So let's get into it. So this film received some pretty good reviews out of the Venice Film Festival, and I was honestly quite excited for this as I really enjoyed Pablo Larrain's last film in Spencer. I really enjoy this subgenre that he's tackling by handling these real life figures that had a pretty important impact on our history and kind of putting them through a little bit of a fictional tale. And he seems to weave that really well. It's a very tight line that you have to follow with these types of films, because if you stray too far in one way or get a little bit too indulgent with your own style of filmmaking, it can become really disrespectful to the people that Pablo Larrain is trying to explore in his films. Something like that happened with Blonde previously, where it did a fictional tale on Marilyn Monroe and felt really disrespectful to the real life figure. Pablo Larrain, I think, seems to balance on that tightrope a lot better, and I was really excited for this to see how he was going to handle a really controversial figure here. The figure in question that Larrain is exploring here is Augusto Pinochet. I don't know too much about him just because I don't know too much about Chilean history, but through this movie and a little bit of my own research, I found that he was a dictator for close to 20 years in Chile and is a very controversial figure as he's drawn support from people despite him being responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. Now, the spin on it here is that Pinochet is a vampire and has lived for 250 years. Obviously, this is a lot of surrealism and provides a metaphor, I think, for his influence over people, his ability to manipulate people, and kind of showing that his impact can live on, whether that be positive or negative. And I think it's an interesting way of looking at it. I don't know if it's necessary in this film, but I think it does make for a very fascinating look at this person. The film also acts as a real condemnation of people forgetting about heinous acts in the past from some of these people and how we're kind of doomed to repeat history if we don't stay knowledgeable of all of these actions and the events that have taken place in the past. The film is supposed to draw parallels from Pinochet's story to what's happening now in current politics. Now, I am pretty mixed on this film, but I'm going to talk about the real good points first and say that yes, this film is shot beautifully. If you've seen the trailer, you know that this has stunning black and white cinematography. It doesn't have a tight 4:3 aspect ratio like Spencer did, but it looks gorgeous. There's a real striking parallel between the dark and heavy blacks that some of the characters are wearing in their costumes versus the real light whites that some other characters are wearing. It is very purposeful, and I really think it helps create some real stunning shots within the film. I think the performances are all fairly good too. None of them are truly outstanding or anything, but none of them are terrible. I think they all do a pretty good job. The lead, played by Jamie Vidal, is quite good, and Paula Lushinger is also fantastic in this film in this great supporting role. I really liked what they brought to the table here, and a lot of the better scenes in the movie featured the two of these people. And lastly, I think the third act in this makes the movie a whole lot better. It is really good. It is tense at times. It is full of metaphors. There's a lot of stuff that it's exploring at the end. It's very creative. It's very daring. And I really liked a lot of what they were trying to do. Not all of it. I think the very end of the movie didn't really hit home for me. But the events leading up to that in the third act were really fascinating, and I found them to be really enjoyable. Now, going to the negatives, unfortunately, this film is a little bit of a snooze fest for the first 2 acts of this movie, there just wasn't too much for me to really attach to or enjoy or even be fascinated by this person. Pablo Larrain just takes a really weird approach with it that just doesn't work. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail as to why it doesn't work. Firstly, the screenplay is far too inconsistent. At times, it can be really abstract and you're kind of getting frustrated because you're not picking up on things that you should be, because they're just too distant, these characters, and the way that they're communicating with each other, it kind of feels like it's not really giving you the information you need to kind of make a good analysis of this film. It's very muddled, it's very messy. I'm fine with films that have a lot of abstract storytelling, no problem at all, but you need to be really concise and you need to communicate very effectively for it to work, whether that be in the visual storytelling, surrealism, or the performances. And this, it just wants to go into too many different places where you just aren't gonna have a real satisfying moment when things start to click for you. Now that's very frustrating because there are other moments where it is far too heavy-handed. It doesn't trust the audience at times. As an example, the narrator in this film is always talking constantly throughout this film. She has a lot of dialogue and she kind of is explaining the thoughts and feelings of the character, and it feels like Pablo Larrain isn't trusting his actors to convey that to us, and he's also not trusting the audience to pick up on what the actor is communicating through just visual storytelling and expressions rather than just pure dialogue. And I find that really frustrating because I think if you took the narration out of those scenes, I'd pick it up fine. I can tell that this character's feeling distraught, or I can tell that they're feeling conflicted. I don't need someone to tell me that. And that's very frustrating when that is heavy-handed and then there are other moments that are just far too abstract. There's no balance there and it becomes really frustrating, and it's just so easy to disconnect from this film and feel kind of bored. I also think there's too many characters here. This movie is about an hour and 40 minutes long, and this is like a whole ensemble piece. I particularly didn't really mesh with the angle of following the children in this story. It felt like a really weak episode of Succession in a way, where they're just trying to take their father's inheritance and kind of scheming as to how to do that. I mean, in its little bubble, it's fine, but it just detracts from the real quality moments of this film, exploring Pinochet, exploring his wife, and this French lady who has some really, really interesting moments in this film. Taking away from that and just following these greedy children, which kind of goes nowhere as well. It doesn't serve really any of the metaphors that the film really wants to talk about. Doesn't really deepen the character of Pinochet or give us any more context other than the fact that his children kind of hate him. But that can kind of be wrapped up fairly quickly. We don't need a whole arc for that. And once again, I found that quite frustrating. I disconnected a lot during those moments. And I just wasn't into it because it doesn't support the main thesis of this film and could have easily been cut. Look, overall, I'm quite frustrated with El Conde. I really wanted a lot more from this movie, and I do think it had the bones to get there. The thesis was interesting. You have a very controversial figure in history who has caused many atrocities that I personally would love to explore this history and find out a lot more, as I didn't know too much about this person. However, Pablo Larrain just kind of wants to keep you at arm's length the entire time, and it just doesn't work. Another quick thing as well is it almost feels like Larrain is being very sympathetic to Pinochet at times. It's kind of giving him a cop-out for the actions that he made in the past. Once again, I don't know too much about this guy, so I can't really slam him or praise him, but the fact that I'm hearing that he is responsible for murders of thousands of people, that's kind of enough for me to go, oh, this guy is probably not a good person in history. He's probably quite evil. And the fact that Larrain wants to give him these cop-outs feels really distasteful to all of these victims. I mean, these are real people here that were affected, and you just can't play around with that. And the fact that we're trying to do this with this artistic flair and going, oh no, he didn't do it because he was a bad person. He did it for these reasons that make him sympathetic. I just don't buy that. I don't really like that. And once again, it hurt the experience for me. So as a score, I'm going to give El Conde a 2.5 out of 5. Honestly, I think that's being a little bit too kind. I was going to go even lower because a lot of this film, I was bored out of my mind. I have to be honest with you. There were moments I paused and I needed a break. This is an hour and 40-minute movie. I shouldn't be doing that, and I did many times because the pacing was just all out of whack. There was nothing to connect to until the third act. We have to get through about an hour and 10 minutes before I start going, oh, some of this stuff is kind of interesting, and I'm starting to buy into stuff. It just seems like it wants to explore the interesting stuff for 5 seconds and then go back to tedious stuff. And I find that very frustrating. I don't like that in films. And once again, I feel like it hurt a lot of this for me. I have no interest in rewatching this ever. It was fine for this one-off, I guess, but it was just too painful for me to rewatch again. Anyway, those are my thoughts towards El Conde. If you've seen the film, it's on Netflix. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And what do you think about Pablo Larrain's filmography at the moment? He does have some very divisive films. I know I said that I love Spencer, but that is a very divisive film. There are some people that really don't like that movie. But yeah, I really got a lot out of that film. I still need to see a lot more of his stuff. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.